I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
4 months after John F. Kennedy was sworn into office, he promised that the United States would put a man on the moon before the end of the 1960s. And on July 20th, 1969,
it's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But why was landing a man on the moon so important? When Kennedy made that promise, the United States and the Soviet Union were at the height of the Cold War. A major front in that war was space, and putting a man on the moon? That would be the ultimate victory. On October 4th, 1957, the Soviet Union had launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite and the first man-made object to orbit the Earth.
Today, a new moon is in the sky, a 23-inch metal sphere placed in orbit by a Russian rocket.
1 month later, they launched Sputnik 2. The American press speculated that these launches gave Russia a military advantage in the Cold War. This marked the beginning of what would be known as the space race. Feeling pressure, the United States launched the Vanguard satellite in December, and after its launch rocket reached the height of a few feet, it burst into flames. Despite the slow start, by the end of 1958, Congress passed and President Eisenhower signed the 1958 Space Act, which created NASA. Both the US and the USSR created lunar exploration programs, each successfully launching moon flyby missions in 1959. But Russia led the space race. In September 1959, Luna 2 became the first spacecraft to reach the moon's surface. On April 12, 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space. The US was in dire need of a win in the space race, and it had to be something big. So President Kennedy asked Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson to look into what the US could do to beat the Soviet Union. Put a laboratory in space? Orbit a man around the moon? Land a man on the moon? NASA's administrator James E. Webb said there was no way to beat the Soviets in building a space station, and the Soviets could probably send a man into the moon's orbit just as quickly. But maybe, just maybe, the US could be the first to land a man on the moon. On May 25, 1961, JFK publicly proposed that the US send a man to the moon and return him safely to Earth before the end of the decade. The effort to land a man on the moon was christened the Apollo program, and Kennedy predicted its success would inspire people worldwide to choose American-style freedom over Soviet-allied tyranny. A few weeks later, Kennedy, ever the diplomat, met with Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev and suggested the moon landing be a joint effort, but Khrushchev said no. The Soviets denied that they were trying to reach the moon, but they were. They built a moon suit prototype and designed a lunar module much like their American counterparts. Even though the Apollo program was launched in the spirit of competition, there were multiple efforts to defuse the space race for diplomatic reasons. In September of 1963, Kennedy even suggested that the US and Soviet Union could still work together on Project Apollo. But any prospect of cooperation ended when he was assassinated 2 months later. Apollo became a memorial to the fallen president, and the space race continued. Many firsts went to the Soviets. The USSR achieved the first long-duration spaceflight, the first multi-person spaceflight, and the first spacewalk. In 1966, Russia pulled off the first soft landing on the moon with Luna 9, but they still hadn't put a man on the moon. On July 20th, 1969, the United States did. Only 5 months before the deadline Kennedy had set at the beginning of the decade. On that day, the Apollo 11 mission landed 2 men, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, on the moon. They walked on the moon's surface for over 2 hours and were then brought safely back to Earth. The US had finally accomplished something big the Soviets had not, and set the stage for the future of space exploration.